Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Dead Presidents Podcast.
This is Presidential War.
Presidential war. What is it good for? Intellectual stimulation. Say it again now. Presidential war. What is it good for? Best game in the nation. Presidential war.
Welcome to the Dead Presidents Podcast, our first special bonus episode, the Presidential War card game.
That's right, a game that we invented.
And now we're going to show you how to play.
Yeah, we're going to share it with you. It's a great game. It's, hey, as the song says, perfect for intellectual stimulation. You know the card game war? Alright, well, same principle, generally. We got our cards dealt out.
Each hand will each flip over a card. Whichever card is the best wins. The twist, we're using the presidential playing card deck.
That's right. And we ought to let our listeners know that we went through several trial and error versions of this game before we settled on this definitive edition.
Yeah, we invented the game during our presidential trips to presidents' homes. In the evenings, we would play this game, try to figure it out. Through trial and error, we have perfected it.
That's right.
We're not just going to straight up judge which president is better overall.
One can't.
We've got special categories, 20-some category cards, by which we will judge presidents and discuss their various accomplishments and traits.
That's it. We got the complete book of U.S. presidents, the Bible of the podcast at hand. That's highly recommended, listeners.
You can play with that, or just have Google handy and you can find out anything you want about the presidents.
Absolutely, you could.
Get yourself a presidential playing card deck, or just get some regular cards and write the presidents' names on them in Sharpie, and you can be playing at home.
Take a Sharpie to them. You could play the game with an ordinary deck of cards. And so, here we go with our first game of Presidential War. We're about to flip the cards now. Here we go. I've drawn Ronald Reagan.
I have drawn John Tyler.
And I'm going to flip the category card here, and we have Relationship with the Media. Ouch, James.
Ooh.
I am so sorry for you, because boy, did the media love Reagan.
Yep.
For the most part, man. Their tongue was right on up his butt.
They called
And
him...
John Tyler, he had a rough time with the press of his day.
Yeah. Tyler, he had an official, kind of his own official, propaganda newspaper that played his own party line. But since he was not a member of either party after being expelled from the Whigs, he didn't really have the regular kind of media treatment that presidents of the time had.
No,
and he also had abolitionist press dragging him. They published the allegation that he fathered children by slave women.
Yeah.
And he did, obviously didn't get nominated for a term in his own right.
Yeah. And, of course, Reagan, by contrast, was an actor.
Yep.
The camera loved him.
He was the great communicator.
That's it. So that's an easy win. For me.
Stephen
so I
Lincoln
take those
Douglas
cards.
Takes those cards.
And we remove that category from the deck. And our second flip, reveals James Buchanan.
And I've got Ulysses S. Grant. And the category is First Lady Looks.
Uh-oh. Disqualified. Boom, 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 Ulysses S. Grant.
First Lady
Wildly, Julia Grant
First
takes
Lady,
away
man.
First Lady Looks.
I feel
The
sorry.
only way that it could happen.
Well, there might be a couple other First Ladies
No.
Julia Grant could beat. I doubt she's dead last.
No.
But, yeah, James Buchanan, the only one without a First Lady, unless we want to... Well, first of all, I feel sorry for the listeners, because this could be a fun category, but not when you draw cards like this. Technically, the First Lady is the official hostess of the White House, and that would be Buchanan's niece, but we don't really count that
That's
in
right.
this category. This is more
Harriet
about...
Lane. And if you want to look at Harriet Lane,
First Lady Looks is about who was the president banging. And
Right.
unless you want to count
the deceased Rufus King.
Buchanan's alleged, possible relationship with William Rufus King, he was never married. He's the only president who was never married. Julia Grant, not renowned for her looks. In fact, lampooned for her looks by the Viceroy of India in his letter where he ridiculed Grant.
Yes.
But I guess by default, Grant has to win this category.
That's right. It's incredible. Julia Grant. Hey, Julia. I'm sorry for what I said in episode 1, okay? You won a hand of presidential war on the category of First Lady Looks. Now
That's one to put under your belt. That's the kind of improbable things you can have in presidential war.
Indeed.
We'll go to
Let's
our third
continue with the
hand.
game.
I have drawn Bill Clinton.
I've drawn John Quincy Adams. And the category is First Lady Accomplishments.
Oh,
Well, I think we gotta hand it to you, James.
yeah, Hillary Clinton definitely had more in the way of public and political accomplishments.
Indeed.
Did a lot of work on healthcare, lots of work as First Lady.
Not to
Sometimes-
detract from Louisa.
Hillary
Adams.
sometimes may be criticized for
But-
trying to take on too much as First Lady, obviously parlayed
Well-
that into a political career of her own.
That's right. So I think we have to hand it to her.
Louisa
Louisa Adams, interesting in her own right. English born,
I think-
not an American citizen.
I think
Had her own opinions. An interesting First Lady.
I think she wrote plays, perhaps, something like that.
Or at least poetry.
Poetry, yeah. Very interesting woman, but Hillary Clinton, very political.
Gotta
First
hand it to
Lady
her.
And accomplished.
Another hand for James J. Hamilton. And we move on.
I've drawn Calvin Coolidge.
And I have drawn Franklin Pierce.
Our category, foreign policy.
Well, I have to hand it to Coolidge on that one. I'm not going to defend myself with that. Franklin
Well-
Pierce's foreign policy was to try and buy Cuba.
Yeah.
The Gadsden
He did have
purchase.
the Gadsden purchase.
But, I mean,
Which, what was the, what did we get in the Gadsden purchase?
the bottom part of
Yeah.
New Mexico and Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Which worked out railroad-wise.
Yeah.
It was a good thing. But
Let's see. I'm looking up in the complete book of U.S. presidents v. Coolidge's foreign policy.
well, I think Coolidge himself said it best in saying that he, pretty much tried to mind his own business. after Wilson's shenanigans.
Yeah. Let's see.
I mean, that's not to say that there wasn't some shit going on, because there was. Remember the movie The Sand Pebbles? That was set in 1926.
Yeah.
Over in Chiang Kai-shek's revolutionary China. We had American vessels over there at the time.
Let's see, in 1928, the Kellogg-Briand Pact.
Right.
That was a treaty between 15 countries agreed to renounce war as a means of settling international disputes. Eventually, 47 other nations joined the pact. So, well-intentioned, but
Didn't work.
outlawing war by treaty.
Yeah. It's all,
Once someone shows up and points a gun at you, that you only need your own gun to point back.
It sounds really nice, but I think regardless...
Clearly ineffective in stopping World War II.
Yeah, but I think regardless of that, Coolidge has the edge over Franklin Pierce when it comes to foreign policy.
Yeah.
Gotta give it to Cal. The hand is yours.
I'll agree with that. We can move on. If you as a listener disagree with the calls we make on any of our hands, write in. Tell us why.
Yeah, feel free to leave a comment. We'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Enlighten us. We're just flying by the seat of our pants in this game. Our
That's
words,
it.
not gospel.
Not at all.
Next hand, I have drawn Benjamin Harrison.
And I've drawn John Adams.
And our category is speeches and writings.
I am sorry, James,
Yeah,
but I don't think there's any question here. Benjamin Harrison, well, Lew Wallace wrote his campaign biography. Lew Wallace, if you didn't know who that was, he wrote Ben-Hur.
Cool.
And actually in the campaign biography, he titled it the exact same way as Ben-Hur. He had, Lew Wallace, Ben-Hur, and then Lew Wallace, Life of Ben Harrison.
Yeah. Ben-Hur and Ben-Hare.
Yeah, he tried to have the font similar.
I'm consulting the complete book of U.S. presidents. It does have Benjamin Harrison writing 2 books, This Country of Ours in 1897 and Views of an Ex-President in 1901. So he did do some writing. But John Adams, prolific and influential writer.
Yeah. Sorry.
Among the speeches and writings, speeches John Adams gave, maybe in the Continental Congress arguing to declare independence from Britain, kind of important.
Yeah.
Speech in the trial of the Boston Massacre soldiers.
It's up there.
Facts are stubborn things. He said
That's
that.
it. Facts are stubborn things, and as a matter of fact, I have won this hand.
Yeah, he's a prolific diarist, has the famous books of correspondence with him and his wife, him and Jefferson.
Yeah.
One of the top tier in terms of speeches and writings overall.
And my God, I literally have spent a lot of time reading their writings.
Yeah, I have a real copy of the National Gazette from 1790, and on the front page is part of a series of essays John Adams wrote. Discourses on Davila, which was a thing he published about history and stuff that ran in the papers while he was vice president.
Awesome.
Didn't have much else to do as vice president.
Yeah. Said he had some free time.
Mm-hmm. All right, our next hand, I've drawn Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
I've drawn William McKinley. The category card, relationship with the people.
Ooh.
Now, this seems pretty clear-handed. FDR, the fireside chats, the people loved him. Elected to the presidency 4 times.
Yeah.
It's a clear-cut victory for him.
Yeah, he connected with the people.
I do want to say that McKinley was not an unpopular president in his time. He did connect with the people.
Yeah, he was very popular, was reelected pretty overwhelmingly. Not so popular with Leon Solkost,
Yeah.
his assassin. But yeah, FDR, he took advantage of the new technology of radio and really had a great relationship with the people as president.
No doubt.
Unprecedented for elections. Against a lot of ingrained prejudice against third termers, he got 4.
Yeah.
And
there was a lot of anti-third termers out there, even amongst his own party.
yeah.
Despite that.
But
Fine.
the love of the people sustained him.
And that's going to lead to another hand for you, James. Seems that you are dominated thus far. You could come back with Chester Arthur.
I've got George H.W. Bush.
All right.
Our category is least scandals.
Well, Chester Arthur is a redemption story. He cleaned shit up once he got into the presidency. Now, George Bush, well, this is a point in history where you're getting into the wishy-washy, super back and forth. Good idea, bad idea.
Yeah, the presidency and the government had changed a lot by George H.W. Bush's term. Presidents these days can't get away without having at least some things considered scandalous. They were still dealing with the fallout of the Iran-Contra thing during his presidency.
Yeah.
Back in Chester Arthur's day, smaller government, less scrutiny. As Chester Arthur famously said, I may be president of the United States, but my private life is nobody's damn business.
Yeah, and Chester Arthur, I'm not going to be too reticent to say, he was involved in his fair share of scandal before he became president. But Arthur is a wonderful redemption story, and you're going to hear all about it in episode 21 of the Dead Presidents podcast. It's going to be fantastic. It's like somebody that was in the mob that was like really bad that then got out and turned around and brought down the people that made him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's the story of Chester Arthur. So I think as president, he was, he did pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll take the category of least scandals.
I mean, that would be my argument. It's just by default. There's so much going on in modern time that it's almost unfair.
Yeah. Move on to a new hand. I've drawn Barack Obama.
And here we have James K. Polk.
Ooh. The category is military accomplishments.
Well, there's not much to say for either of them.
Yeah, it's this, I guess this category is more directed towards their military career of pre-presidency.
Sure, but I guess we could say...
Or,
what were their military accomplishments during the presidency?
I mean,
could
we
be
do. There,
said.
foreign policy is another category, but
Polk was a colonel in the Tennessee State Militia and never saw any action.
and Obama had no military service of any kind. Presidential-wise, Obama authorized the hit on Osama bin Laden. Good accomplishment.
Yeah.
Had some other shit going on. Libya. ISIS.
Yeah. None of which led to civil war down the road that we know of.
Yeah. Knock on wood. Polk superintended the massively successful Mexican-American War.
As well as the procurement of the Oregon Territory.
Yeah. Well, military-wise, from a military standpoint, Mexican-American War, very successful.
Indeed it was. So I suppose we give this one to Polk.
Yep, I think Polk will have to take this category.
Polk, I would argue, is one of the better cards in the game.
Yeah, he's a very versatile success as president. We've got new hand. I've drawn Grover Cleveland. There are two Grover Cleveland cards. He
That's right.
served two non-consecutive terms. This is 22nd president, first term Cleveland.
Ooh, the better of the two, and I have drawn Martin Van Buren.
And the category is looks.
Well, one of these two guys hooked up with a 21-year-old, so...
Well, this isn't First Lady looks.
Yeah.
Cleveland, at least by the time he's president, he's put on some weight.
He's a hefty guy.
He's got, you recently showed me the picture of the slim young Cleveland.
That
And
that one would take the cake.
I wondered whether, his wife Frances Cleveland kept that picture of young Cleveland on the nightstand to look at while fat Cleveland was on top of her.
I mean, if you go by looks, they're right there. Because, after that point, no way. And Van Buren, was he ever really attractive?
Well, yeah, he seems to have a receding hairline even as a slightly younger man.
Yeah.
He was very clean and well groomed.
He was very clean. I don't know. Like, maybe when he was, 15, he might have been hot.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Cleveland's fat, but he's fairly good looking for a fat guy. He's got a nice distinguished mustache.
Distinguished.
And when he's
Yeah.
this
is next to impossible.
when he's got old Francis Cleveland on his arm, no one's looking at him.
That's
So
right.
that's an advantage.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably give it to Cleveland, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I would too. By a hair.
Yeah. That was
Go.
a tough one.
Yeah.
My God.
Next, I've drawn Dwight Eisenhower.
And I have drawn Harry S. Truman. Interesting matchup. Most like to meet. That is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it's a very subjective category.
Indeed it is. Perhaps, in this instance, let us show the viewer how we handle a draw, James. If we can't come to an agreement,
Well,
what do we do?
we haven't even discussed it yet, though.
We haven't, but it's really hard. I mean, you got a goddamn war hero and another war hero.
Yeah.
who was a completely common man, who nobody thought was going to become president. They're both known in their own way for their own line of conversation. I think,
Truman.
personally, I'd rather have hung out with Harry Truman.
Truman was our number 5 on top 5 funniest presidents.
Yeah, I mean, I would, just me personally, but I can
Eisenhower.
understand a lot of people saying that given this choice, I gotta hang out with General Eisenhower.
I mean, yeah, he's got...
But
He and Truman-
personally, I'd want to hang out with Harry Truman. I'd want to hear him play piano.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'd have a drink. You know,
Eisenhower...
tell some jokes. Just have a good time.
They both served in World War I as young men. Eisenhower obviously have more high-level war stories from World War II.
Sure.
I don't know if the meeting could include, playing a round of golf with Dwight Eisenhower.
Ooh.
I'd probably like to play with him. He could tell his hole-in-one story.
I'd probably be too afraid to play a game with him.
Yeah.
He'd probably be like, "Come on, idiot. What are you doing? Holding up the game."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I'm sorry, General Eisenhower, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, since this is close and it is a subjective category, and I'd choose Eisenhower, so that sounds like a good tie. And we will, in the event of the tie, go to sudden death, where we will
Indeed.
draw another hand, and whoever wins the next hand wins all 4 cards.
Here we go.
And I will draw Richard Nixon.
And I will draw Warren Harding.
And their category will be Effect on the Office of the Presidency.
Boom, boom, boom. I gotta give it to Nixon. I wouldn't even argue it, to be honest.
I don't know. I think I recall a past time we played this game, we had Nixon on this category too. And I argue that Nixon had a severe negative effect on the presidency. I think Harding probably did to some extent too, because he had lots of scandals as well. But the way Nixon, got caught in Watergate and had to resign really, I think, created a huge amount of skepticism and distrust about the presidency for years afterwards, and really even still today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a lot of ways, Nixon was a very successful president who did a lot of good things. I think the whole Watergate thing, and he's the only president who had to resign. It's such a black mark, and it created such a dark cloud over the presidency in terms of, other presidents were probably doing shady things behind the scenes, but the way he got caught with it just makes people think and suspect now that the president is a crook who's doing some kind of shady stuff behind the scenes.
That's right.
So I think he had a negative effect.
Indeed. And Harding as well.
He did too,
Harding
but...
was gambling away White House China. He was drinking during Prohibition. I mean, he was breaking the laws of the United States as the sitting president just as much as Nixon.
Yeah, he did, true. But I just think the
And moreover, Harding was not as savvy as Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes it worse or if that makes it better.
Yeah.
But
that's hard. I don't know.
In terms of effect on the office of presidency, you're talking 2 scandals. But I mean, in my opinion, Nixon was the better president, hands down, when compared to Harding. But
I don't disagree with that. but I just
If
think
their
his
effect on the
lasting
office.
effect was negative.
But it wasn't more potent.
Yeah, I don't think Harding had that much of effect. He had lots of scandals, but he died, and I don't think
And I think that was the end of it. So the
that was the end of it.
lasting effect belongs to Nixon.
Yeah, but it was negative, I think. He had a long-term negative effect.
Well, does it matter whether it was a negative or positive effect? It's just the effect on the office.
I would think positive effect wins over negative.
I can't agree that Harding had a positive effect.
Well, he didn't, but he had less of a negative effect than Nixon, or at least that's what I'm saying. This is a tricky category.
It really is. We can almost go into a double tiebreaker.
Some presidents don't. It's hard to judge them in this. A lot of presidents didn't have much of an effect on the presidency at all.
In our first episode, we're going to have a double tiebreak. Here it goes.
Let's go for it.
I can't decide on this. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't!
We'll have double sudden death, and this hand will have a huge effect on the game. I've drawn William Henry Harrison.
And I have drawn Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, man. I can't think of what category I will win this on. Actually, maybe that one. Who would you pick first in flag football?
Oh, my God!
Well, maybe not if you're going...
You would go with Mr. Jefferson's hammer.
Yeah. It depends if you...
Holy shit. I think we have a serious upset.
Yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing. If you're talking at the time they're president, William Henry Harrison was old and feeble and on the verge of death. And Jefferson, he was around in his early 60s.
I don't think he was on the verge of death when he got elected. I think the circumstances led to him getting sick.
True.
Because even the inaugural address thing is a myth. Mm-hmm. That's not what killed him. He recovered from that, but he insisted on doing his own shopping, and he got caught in another storm.
Yeah. Yeah, but he was, he was a frontiersman, a military officer.
He was a badass, whereas Jefferson was a gawky, lanky, bookish. Yeah. If I was gonna choose between the two in flag football, Willie Hen, baby.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I'm not gonna disagree with you and cause myself to lose the triple sudden death.
Well, hey man, I think you've earned this triple sudden death.
Man,
that just goes to show that presidential war could go any way.
Yeah, Julia Grant won First Lady looks. William Henry Harrison beat Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, come on, man. What a fucking game. It's brilliant.
We will move on to the next hand where I will draw Gerald Ford.
And I have drawn JFK.
Too bad we didn't have Ford in the football category.
Yeah.
Number one most athletic president. The category here, relationship with Congress.
Now that's an interesting one here.
Well, Ford, I think, was the victim of what I was talking about earlier, where Nixon, kind of, darkened, clouded everything, and a Democratic Congress at the time, not a fan of a Republican president on the heels of Nixon.
Yeah.
And especially not liking his pardon of Nixon. I'm looking up in the complete book of U.S. presidents. During Ford's term, there was a campaign reform law passed, campaign finance reform in reaction to financial abuses of Watergate. There was an extension of the Voting Rights Act. And the establishment of the Energy Research and Development Administration, converting the Atomic Energy Commission to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Yeah, not a lot of big, like, legislative accomplishments in Ford's term.
Yeah.
And again, not, you know, really loved by the Democratic Congress.
Well, I mean,
Also,
I'd say, Kennedy didn't exactly have a smooth relationship with Congress, but, I mean, he did get started with, like, some civil rights stuff, and...
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at him in the complete book of U.S. presidents as well. Doesn't look like he had very many major legislative accomplishments. A lot of things he's best known for, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Bay of Pigs,
Yeah.
are, executive actions, not, not cleared with Congress as far as Bay of Pigs and stuff goes. But in a sense, he did those things and kind of got away with them, so it's not like Congress was denouncing him. And he kind of had...
And after he died, they certainly didn't.
Yeah, he had popular approval on his side, so that probably helped him with Congress. I'd probably give it to him. Neither of these presidents had major legislative accomplishments, but I'd say Kennedy on this hand.
That's true. And so, we move on.
I have drawn Andrew Johnson.
And I have drawn Teddy Roosevelt.
This is another, I think the odds are in favor of TR here. Let's see what upset Andy Johnson could pull out of his ass. Nope, I don't
The
think so.
economy, I am sorry. Bum, bum, ba-dum. Andy Johnson coming in during Reconstruction. Things aren't necessarily fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Taking over.
Teddy Roosevelt is the Industrial Revolution. We're an empire now. He's all about...
Did major antitrust reform.
Yeah.
The economy was pretty booming in general during that time. Andy Johnson taking over in the wake of the Southern economy being devastated by the abolition of slavery and by the devastation of war.
That's it.
Yeah, TR in general, a pretty successful president.
Yeah,
across
he was
the board.
focused on, hey, national parks. We can afford it.
Yeah.
And the nation will benefit and profit from it. We gotta hand this one to TR.
Yeah.
A clear-cut Vic in this instance.
Next hand I've drawn old James Madison.
And we have come down with Millard Fillmore.
Category Strength of Presidential Appointments.
Well, there's really no question here.
Yeah, James Madison, he struggled with appointments in his first cabinet, but he ended up with, making the great call to put, he made James Monroe Secretary of State and then made him acting Secretary of War.
Yeah.
I guess you'd also fault him for some of his early appointments of generals in the War of 1812, but again, turned it around, naming William Henry Harrison, Andrew Jackson, to their very successful commands.
And not that they were necessarily appointments, but the vice presidential death rate in the Madison administration was 100%.
Yep. Both of his vice presidents bit the dust.
And Millard Fillmore himself, a vice president, to come into the office and serve but a short time in his brief tenure. He did not have too much time for appointments.
Yeah, let's see. I'm looking up James Madison. You also had, of course, Albert Gallatin as Treasury Secretary. And he also, Madison appointed, the diplomatic commission that negotiated the Treaty of Ghent, which included Gallatin, John Quincy Adams, and Henry Clay, an all-star team of negotiators.
Indeed.
Madison also he appointed William Crawford as Treasury Secretary, who became very prominent in his own right.
I don't know if
once a presidential contender.
Is Daniel Webster as Secretary of State. You can't do better.
Nope, that was pretty
well,
good.
The only better that you could do in Secretary of State is John Quincy Adams.
Perhaps.
After John Quincy Adams, Daniel Webster.
Yeah.
Top 2 Secretaries of State of all time.
Yeah, arguably that's true. I'm also looking up Madison also appointed Joseph Story to the Supreme Court, one of the legendary Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
He served alongside Justice Marshall, Chief Justice Marshall, kind of joined in a lot of his decisions.
And this is keeping the Federalist beacon alive, which is, like, defunct.
Yeah, Story wrote the opinion in Martin versus Hunter's lessee, which established the Supreme Court right to review the decisions of state courts. He also just wrote, lots of legal scholarship and was just very influential in general, beyond any just specific cases, just very, very well respected.
Yeah. So, I think despite Daniel Webster, we're going to hand this one to Madison, don't we?
Yeah. He has also had a much longer presidency and opportunity.
Indeed.
So.
Yeah, by quite a bit.
Madison will take this category. Next, I have drawn Old Honest Abe Lincoln.
And I've drawn Rutherford Hayes.
The category, pre-presidential accomplishments.
Well, now. He got Hayes as a lawyer and serving in the Civil War, was wounded several times. Overall, solid soldier was Rutherford Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
Great intellect. Great lawyer. And I mean, he did... He had a lot of the standard run. But, I mean, as opposed to Lincoln, man.
Lincoln, he was a postmaster. He was in the Illinois state legislature. He was in the House of Representatives for 2 years. Not a lot of, major offices held, but he had, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, the House divided speech. He was just, an intellectual leader of the Republican Party and the whole, movement of everything that culminated in his election as president.
Yeah, I mean, Hayes, since Cincinnati City Solicitor, U.S. Representative, and Governor of Ohio, 2 different times.
No.
As well as his Civil War record. But, I mean, you can't touch Lincoln.
Yeah.
In terms of his pre-presidential accomplishments, you can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I... read the biography, his biography, almost got the sense that when he became president, he was almost thrown into something that he wasn't qualified for in a way, because he hadn't had a lot of government experience or executive experience.
Right.
And especially, the shitstorm that he was thrown into.
Yeah.
But, just intellectually and ideologically...
I mean, there are a couple guards that could beat Lincoln in this category.
Oh, I think
not many.
I think many people could beat him in pre-presidential accomplishments, but Hayes isn't necessarily any kind of a giant in that regard.
No. Someone would be, you'd have to make an argument. But others, Washington, obviously.
Yeah, I think
Jefferson,
yeah, a lot of
most of the early
the ones whose pre-presidency
JQA,
includes the Revolution.
Jackson, pretty much all of the forebears. And, once you get up to a certain point.
Yeah. But Lincoln will take the sand from Hayes.
Certainly.
And we will move on. I have drawn Andrew Jackson.
And I have drawn Woodrow Wilson.
The category, biggest partier.
Well, I gotta hand it to Andy Jackson for the People's Inaugural, for his love of cockfighting and horse racing and gambling in general.
Yeah,
he was the partier.
Yeah, as far as the People's Inaugural goes, he was more an innocent victim of, of the party. And he didn't even,
as a matter of fact, he was.
He didn't even go to the inaugural ball because he was in mourning for his wife. But he was a cockfighter and gambler. And there was that story when he was young and inherited the money from his uncle. He blew it all in a big carouse.
Yep.
So,
Pissed it away.
I don't know much about Woodrow Wilson's partying, but just... he's an academic. Just looking at his picture, you can tell he doesn't party.
No, he's not.
Listeners, if you're aware of Woodrow Wilson, cutting loose and partying on some occasion, let us know. But
feel free. We don't think it's out there.
I don't think it's in the book of U.S. presidents either.
It appears I am being dominated in this game.
Well, it's not about who wins or loses. It's all about playing the game.
That's right.
And I'm playing this hand with George Washington.
Oof. And I'm playing with Herbert Hoover. So hopefully the category is spoke Mandarin at home.
Instead, the category is post-presidential accomplishments.
Okay. Well...
Washington.
I'd have to give it to Washington because, honestly, though, there's a comparison that could be made between these two. In all seriousness, you could compare these two because they became like old sages. Kennedy had Hoover over a couple different times to talk about policy and decisions. There's pictures of them together.
Yeah.
People consulted with Hoover.
Yeah, well, I guess
post-presidency, he
Hoover
became a little bit more well-respected.
He lived a while.
That's
because,
right.
He had a very respected pre-presidency.
Well, that's it. He had a very respectable pre-presidency. And then a shit presidency. But it didn't stop people from seeking his advice later on.
Yeah, Washington, he only lived about maybe 2.5 years after his presidency.
Right.
But he did, his post-presidential accomplishments include technically being commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army during the Quasi-War. He, named Hamilton as second-in-command. The thing is, Washington, he's post-president, but when it looks like we're on the verge of war with France, everybody turns to Washington.
Yeah.
And his just presence and, even if he wasn't too active, his just guiding hand behind the scenes made everyone feel good. If he had been dead at that time, people would have been a lot more uneasy about the whole thing.
Absolutely.
I think just... being George Washington
was enough of a post-presidential accomplishment.
For a couple years at the time when, at a time when...
His biggest post-presidential accomplishment being George Washington.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And I'm not going to argue it.
Yeah. He didn't have a lot of time.
I'm just saying, a little bit of respect for Hoover, okay?
Mm-hmm.
He gets knocked all the fucking time. Hey, people were seeking out his advice, including JFK. So, a little bit of credit
I'm
towards
looking.
Hoover, although Washington absolutely wins this hand.
Here's the thing. In the complete book of U.S. presidents, Hoover, in 1938, he toured Europe as it drifted toward war. He met with Adolf Hitler, whom he found, quote, partly insane, but intelligent and well-informed. A partly correct opinion of Hitler.
Yeah. What a way to describe somebody.
Intelligent, well-informed, and insane.
Partly insane.
We will start a new hand.
Good Lord.
In which I will draw Zachary Taylor.
And I have drawn Grover Cleveland, Term 2.
Category, relationship with the Constitution.
Now, Cleveland was always about it, but you gotta give Zachary Taylor some credit, because, even though he was a dirty slave owner himself, he did stand up against it.
Yeah, let's see. The Compromise of 1850 was in the works during his presidency.
I mean, he really stood up for himself beyond what people thought he was capable of.
Yeah, he opposed the extension of slavery, opposed the Compromise of 1850, which allowed the extension of slavery.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I mean, I give Taylor credit, but at the same time, it's hard to say that his relationship with the Constitution was any better than Grover Cleveland, who's known for his veto power and utilizing the Constitution to his advantage.
Yeah, this is a tough category sometimes.
Indeed.
It's, not a lot of presidents, or sometimes presidents don't have obvious traits in this category.
Yeah. Well, and even second term, Cleveland was not the veto powerhouse that he was in the first term.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps we call this one a draw as well?
Yeah, I'd be cool with that.
Let's see what happens here. I've drawn LBJ.
I've drawn William Howard Taft. In the category, who would win in a fight?
Ooh!
Now, a sumo wrestling match? Taft.
Straight up brawl. I mean, Johnson's a big guy.
Johnson, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall, weighing in at 210 pounds. Let's see Taft's stats.
Hardcore Texan.
Taft, 6 feet 2 inches tall. His weight, as president, his weight soared to 332 pounds. I don't know. They're big guys. Taft, I don't know. He's so fat that you wouldn't think he would have good stamina or speed.
That's my line of thought. I think he would get tired.
Yeah.
And he
Johnson
might be able to take some punishment. But LBJ.
Yeah, he just seems like an ornery kind of guy who would probably know how to fight a little bit.
Indeed. I'd have to hand it to him.
Yeah, me too. Coming down towards the end, we've got 2 more hands left to go.
That's it.
I'm drawing Jimmy Carter.
And I'm drawing James A. Garfield.
In the category, Best President Overall.
Oof.
This is the category where we just go straight up, who's a better president?
I say Garfield. Despite things getting cut short.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Garfield is a small sample size, but
Yeah, I think Garfield, had he lived, could have been among the best presidents. I really like James Garfield. And as a human being, I really, really like Jimmy Carter. But as a president, he just didn't have a good time as president.
no.
Wonderful human being. Just unlucky president.
Yeah, the economy was pretty shitty. He had the infamous malaise.
Yeah.
He had the, Iran hostage crisis that he couldn't resolve.
That's it.
Took Reagan to do that.
I gotta give
Some
it to
things.
Jimmy Garfield.
Yeah, I'll give it to Garfield as well on that one. And for the final
Last
category, the final hand I've drawn, George W. Bush.
And I've drawn James Monroe.
And they will be judged by domestic policy.
Oof. Well, I gotta give it to Monroe. Era of good feelings. Monroe's a more foreign policy known president, and Bush is probably more foreign policy known too, but his domestic policy is known to be particularly bad. No Child Left Behind. Name one teacher who thinks No Child Left Behind was a good idea. You can't.
Yeah.
If they're serious. I mean, the domestic policy, I think just No Child Left Behind alone was bad. And the Homeland Security bullshit and they start spying on people and just no.
Yeah, that's a little shady.
I think
He's
it's-
known for...
I prefer Monroe in this category.
Bush had tax cuts, some people like. Let me see. Mostly known. Well, he had dealt with Hurricane Katrina. That wasn't necessarily
Didn't go
the
well.
finest hour. Also dealing in the final months of his term, the financial crash. Did a little bit to prop that up. Maybe not a ton to ward it off from happening in general.
Yeah.
Monroe, domestic policy-wise, Missouri Compromise.
Well,
Not like he...
I mean, it held things off for
yeah.
30 years, but
Yeah, it's not like he had a choice to avoid that issue. He kind of personally believed that it was unconstitutional to bar future states from allowing slavery, which I think based on was a reasonable assumption at the time, as long as you assume, as they did at the time, that states were allowed to have slavery.
yeah.
Banning future states from having it was like making them second-class states in a way, which in a way is unconstitutional. But he signed it anyway as a compromise because he thought it might cause civil war if he didn't,
Yeah.
and it probably would have precipitated the Civil War closer if he
It very
didn't.
well
but,
could have.
So he did that. I mean, there was the Panic of 1819. He
Yeah.
vetoed internal improvements.
But we had a recession under Bush, too.
Yeah.
I think I would hand this one to Monroe.
I would agree.
Not that it's going to win me the game, listeners.
Both of those were more foreign policy presidents. We've now reached the end. We will count up our cards to see who wins. Although we've both already won, and so have you, listeners.
That's it.
this is the most exciting time in the episode for the listeners while we are not speaking because we're counting cards.
Yeah, I had
Listeners
20.
are just waiting in pins and needles anticipation. I had 24.
And therefore, James J. Hamilton is the victor in this, the first game of Presidential War. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to be back with many more games.
Write in and tell us your opinion of any of our discussions or hands, if you have strong opinions or disagree, and if you start playing
we'd like to hear
Presidential
from you.
War at home, let us know how it goes.
Yeah, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. And as far as the Presidential War segment goes, we want to start featuring some guests.
Yeah,
So if you think you're worthy of appearing on the Dead Presidents podcast as a guest in Presidential War, hit us up on Twitter at Dead Prez Podcast.
tell us why you
State your
should
case.
be on the show.
State your case. We'll hear you out, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we could arrange for you to join us in a game of Presidential War.
You know what might help your case? Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, share, retweet. Do your part.
All that jazz, and we'll be looking too. Don't think you're gonna join us if you haven't subscribed
Yeah.
or if you haven't commented.
Do you have several million Twitter followers and could retweet the podcast to them? You can be on the show.
That's right.
If Justin Bieber wants to be on the show, as long as he retweets it, he can.
The opportunity is all yours. This has been Stephen Lincoln Douglas
And James J. Hamilton.
signing off from this, the inaugural episode of Presidential War. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.